particularly excited to be hosting this event because it has been something that has been discussed within the NAA circles over the years, including with Dr. Glenn Jude, one of our plenary presenters this morning, a longtime member of NAA, and as you will learn, one of the early promoters of the long-term ecological study concept in the early 80s. This concept took root and resulted in studies that have been funded for over 40 years by the National Science Foundation. Over the years, we've come to recognize, NAA has come to recognize that the critical body of knowledge coming out of the LTER network is significant. Given NAA's core function as a conduit of meaningful and reliable research, we realized that we needed to find a way to disseminate that knowledge throughout the practitioner community, especially within the state, tribal, and NGO communities. Sectors not easily reached by the LTERs themselves, but active in NAA. When we gathered a small group of NAA partners who had also been involved in LTER research to explore gathering these study units for this conference program, we thought we would be successful if 2 to 4 sites would be interested. We sent an invitation to the LTERs, and with the encouragement and partnership of Marty Downs, the coordinator of the LTER network, we quickly had positive responses from 17 of the 27 LTERs. It's thanks to Marty, a most exceptional partner in this endeavor, and those NAA partners who shared a vision with us, that each of you, for the price of admission to the conference today, now has direct access to 63% of the LTERs and their ecological research. That said, informative and applicable research is a two-way street. We encourage all of you to make your voices heard during the breakout sessions today. Please use this time to offer feedback, ask questions, and share your experiences and challenges to inform future study. Researchers are interested in hearing from you today as well. If we do this right, today will be the first of these kinds of dialogues and prove that an ongoing connection between practitioners and researchers is truly valuable and something that NAA and our partners hope to continue to support. We will open the program today hearing from three of our 4 plenary speakers who will talk about the importance of long-term ecological research and the mission of the LTER network to support the LTER sites, why the National Science Foundation invests in long-term ecological research, and the importance of this research to on-the-ground natural areas practitioners. Following the plenary sessions and a break, we will transition then into facilitated breakout sessions based on an ecosystem of interest. At the conclusion of the breakout sessions, we'll gather once again in the plenary session for highlights and sharing. And then we will hear from our last plenary speaker, Sunny Fleming, as she considers a horizon of opportunity and where we can go from here. So with that, I'll introduce our first plenary speaker, Dr. Evelyn Gaiser. Dr. Gaiser is professor in the Institute of Environment and in the Department of Biological Sciences at Florida International University. She is a distinguished university professor of biological sciences and holds the George M. Barley Jr. Eminent Scholars Chair at Florida International University. She's an aquatic ecologist who studies algal responses to climate and land use change and has published over 130 peer-reviewed papers informing the protection of waterways. For 15 years, Dr. Gaiser led the Florida Coastal Everglades Long-Term Ecological Research Program, one of 27 such programs funded by the National Science Foundation, and now chairs the executive board of the LTER network. Evelyn is a member of the State of Florida Blue-Green Algae Task Force and the Academy of Science, Engineering, and Medicine of Florida. She received her BS from Kent State University, her MS from Iowa State University, and a Ph.D. at University of Georgia. Dr. Gaiser?
Well, thank you so much, Lisa. And let me go ahead and share my screen here. It's such a pleasure to be part of this conference today. I have a talk that I put together with Marty Downs, the director of the network office, who worked hard with Lisa to make sure that we have a productive meeting today. I also just wanted to mention I was so inspired by the award recipients, and thank you for all that you've done. I'm going to give you a little overview of the LTR network, and then um, I'll give you a little insight into what some of the sites are up to, but you're really going to get the meat of that information this afternoon. So I hope that you attend the afternoon breakouts and enjoy that conversation that ensues. What I'm going to try to do in this presentation is give just a brief history of the network and the just overview of the current distribution of sites. I'll talk about some of our goals and how we're structured as place-based scientific communities within a network. I'll do this brief tour of the different kinds of sites and a few examples of how we work with land managers and practitioners. And then I'll end with a few opportunities of how you can engage more with LTR, which we hope is an important outcome of today's meeting. So this is a nice map showing the distribution of our LTER, existing LTER sites. Again, the program was established by the National Science Foundation in 1980 in order to have research going on that over long enough periods where we can actually capture the kinds of dynamics that occur in ecosystems, which happen over multiple years and multiple decades. So we're on a 6-year funding cycle at sites. So we write proposals that are evaluated by peers and the NSF process every 6 years. And we have thousands of investigators distributed across our 27 sites from universities, colleges, but importantly also agencies and NGOs to do that important translational work. We generate lots and lots of long-term data sets. There are over 7,000 that are easily available, and those drive our publication in the peer-reviewed literature of over 19,000 journal articles. And as you see on this map, we cross a really wide range of ecosystems and biomes. This next slide is just presenting a timeline of the different sites in the network, and you can see that some have endured 40 plus years of research, which is just phenomenal. It's given us so much insight into how these ecosystems, and in fact ecosystems in general, operate. And you can see some changes in the distribution of types of sites. These are all color-coded by their different ecosystem types. And in the early 2000s, we had a big cohort of coastal sites that came online. And then more recently, a nice new cohort of coastal marine sites to address or to really fill out the scope of biomes that the LTR network covers. So one of the goals of our place-based research is to understand ecosystem dynamics, but we also want to make sure that we do that in a way that helps us understand ecosystems in general and drives synthesis science. And the way that we accomplish that is by having a strong commitment to long-term research in the core areas of ecosystem science. And so all sites are collecting data on these 5 topics: the patterns and controls of primary production, the spatial and temporal distribution of different types of populations and communities of organisms, what drives the patterns and controls on organic matter accumulation in soils. We also look into the patterns of and movements of inorganic nutrients in soils, in the groundwater and in surface waters. And really importantly, we study the patterns and frequencies of disturbances and their impacts. And that's something that we can really nicely and uniquely do in LTER research, because through our long-term data, we can capture those before disturbance, the disturbance itself, and the after disturbance dynamics that are so important to understanding the whole process of disturbance. But we also, across many of our sites, address the dynamics of social ecological ecosystems. And so we work with land use, land cover change data sets and approaches, and we work across societal sectors to help understand how ecosystems are transforming together with societies who are codependent on them. And this is particularly true for our urban LTERs that I'll talk more about in a minute. Well, LTR science is conducted in multiple different ways. We do observational studies, we do long-term experiments and models, just like other ecologists. But one of the core roots of the research that we do is maintaining these long-term data sets, most of which can be organized around the core areas that I showed you. We have decadal, multi-decadal data sets that contain repeated observations of key variables that are important for our particular sites and that can help us address key hypotheses that are relevant to those sites and key theories that matter in ecology in general. Well, we also have this opportunity to not just do controlled experiments, but do experiments that can be enduring, that can last multiple years, if not decades, and that can be conducted over large spatial scales as well as a result of our large place-based domains that we work within. We also do a lot of modeling. This includes conceptual and mathematical models that help us test hypotheses and help us understand the mechanisms of long-term change. And we populate those and test those models with our long-term data and with our long-term experimental results. And this is something that also unites all of our sites because we're all doing this kind of modeling, these types of modeling studies. We also, and very importantly for today's meeting, love engaging with a variety of different communities, including very importantly, practitioners, tribes, policymakers. We work a lot with the news media and in many different ways with the general public. We have this advancing public engagement across LTER's program that supports and actually develops strategies for how to best engage with public sectors. We have worked really hard with policymakers to shape practices at all levels of governance. And we also engage artists in LTER site in LTR sites in a variety of different ways to help with that public engagement and to also help scientists with form a deeper understanding of our own research and discoveries. This is a recent list of partners that was put together. It's not fully comprehensive, but it just gives you a sense of how we do work very closely and involve at each of our sites a variety of partners from industry and nonprofits at all levels, from national to state to local scales, as well as government agency scientists and managers at federal, state, and local levels to make sure that the research that we do is constructed and designed in a way that best supports fruitful adaptive management of ecosystems. We also work really closely with schools and school districts through our education programming, where we work with students, we work with teachers, and also with national organizations that advance STEM research and education. We develop different types of products that are then used in classrooms all around the world, some of which are dependent on our long-term data. We work a lot and very closely with teachers through within our sites and across sites to make sure that they have everything they need and can develop in their ways of using science and working with students directly in a research framework. And I also wanted to mention that we are really dedicated to mentoring and training across all levels of education. I wanted to particularly call out our graduate students who are an incredibly important component of LTERs and drive our science forward. And we are very attentive to mentoring them and other early career scientists into successful careers. Well, we're also dedicated to synthesis, taking our place-based knowledge and bringing it all together into the big picture. And we can do that by publicly making our data available through initiatives like the Environmental Data Initiative, which is something that was started in LTR and now is a data clearinghouse used throughout the world to make public data accessible. We have a wonderful LTR network office that supports all kinds of efforts towards synthesis, including data synthesis activities. And we engage at national and international scales with a variety of different networks to ensure that we're widely sharing data, widely understanding the context for our results. So let me give you a just really brief tour of our LTER sites, and we'll just go through them here by type, so you get a little bit of an understanding of the different types of sites. This might be helpful for choosing which breakout session you might attend this afternoon. So I'll begin here with the coastal sites, and let me just we have quite a few of them. I'll start on the coastal, on the West Coast with our Santa Barbara coastal site that is focused on the kelp communities of the California coast, all the way up to our Beaufort Lagoon ecosystems, our highest latitude site. Where scientists are studying under ice communities. And then we'll move over to the East Coast where we have our Plum Island estuary ecosystem shown so beautifully in this picture, down to our coastal estuaries and barrier island ecosystems of the Virginia Coastal Reserve and the Georgia Coastal Ecosystems, LTRs, and then down to our freshwater and marine communities of our Florida Coastal Everglades LTER, which is, why is it? Okay, a site that I've been involved with for the majority of my career. And I just wanted to call out within each one of these ecosystem types, some of the science that's going on that is conducted in a way that really helps drive improved management of these landscapes. And we do that quite a bit in the FCE LTER because we're in the midst of a huge restoration program to restore freshwater flows. And we work very closely in this co-production space between academia and practitioners to make sure that the science is designed and conducted in a way that most effectively supports adaptive ecosystem management. Moving over into our marine sites, these are mostly coastal marine sites that some of which are new and relatively new, including the northern Gulf of Alaska and the Northeast Shelf over in the Northwest Atlantic, where scientists are studying the shape and function of these coastal marine communities. We can go all the way down to the Palmer LTR site that's off the coast of Antarctica, where scientists are studying changing sea ice and its influence on everything from krill to penguins. We move over to the coast of California to the California current ecosystems that are these upwelling ecosystems that are incredibly productive and driven by ocean atmospheric circulation patterns. And we have a site all the way in French Polynesia. Sorry, it's covered by my there it is down in the lower left corner, where scientists are studying coral reefs. And I'll just focus in a little bit on the work that's going on there to understand resilience of coral reefs under the obvious pressures of climate change and coastal acidification. But these scientists are working very closely with educational programs and local cultures to make sure that their forecasts of the future condition of these economically and socially, culturally important ecosystems are well understood and managed by local communities. We'll move over to our freshwater sites. There are many sites in the LTER program network that have very important freshwater ecosystem studies going on. Two of them have mostly freshwater science, so we'll call those out: the North Temperate Lakes program in Wisconsin, and then the McMurdo Dry Valleys, which in which the ecology is very much centered around these ephemeral streams and the under ice communities and their lakes. I just, again, wanted to call out some very important intersectional research going on at the North Temperate Lakes LTER site, which is focused on studies of abrupt change. And that includes abrupt changes in economically important resources like these manumen or wild rice fields that are so subject to abrupt changes driven by a number of different pressures. So scientists there are working very closely with local communities to understand and manage those dynamics in these rice fields. Moving into our forest biomes, and our terrestrial ecosystems, we have Bonanza Creek in Alaska and the Andrews Forest down in Oregon that are studying the influence of fire on ecosystem dynamics. And that's particularly relevant, as we know Andrews Forest was subject to such a severe fire in this past year. We also have our Harvard Forest and Hubbard Brook sites studying forest and watershed dynamics in the Northeast, and our Luquillo LTER site in the El Yunque forests of Luquillo, where they're studying all kinds of disturbances in these watersheds, including hurricanes and tropical storms. And I, again, wanted to call out one of our forest sites, the Harvard Forest LTER, that's been working really closely with so many different conservation organizations to ensure that all of their very hefty modeling efforts that help us understand how these forested ecosystems will be changing and as they confront climate and land use change, to make sure that those models are effectively used in land use, land cover scenario planning by their constituents. Moving into our mixed landscapes, we have our dry land sites of the Savietta and Jornada LTRs, trying to understand how changing water availability is influencing vegetation transitions in these important landscapes and arid lands. And our Cedar Creek LTR that is in Minnesota and very well known for very complicated experimental, long-term experimental studies. And I wanted to call out the Savietta LTER here because it is in this type of landscape that covers about 50% of the terrestrial lands of the globe and is expanding in global extent. And so their studies of how these ecosystems are transitioning in response to changing rainfall and water availability are really important globally, as well as in the management of drylands in New Mexico, which rank as our #1 most water challenged areas in the United States. Let's move over into the grassland and agricultural sites. The Kanza Prairie is a site in our tall grass prairies of Kansas, where scientists also do very large landscape manipulations of bison grazing and fire and nutrients to understand dynamics of these important tall grass prairies. And our Kellogg Biological Station that I will zoom into here, where research is addressing very much the management of important agronomic practices and how we might improve upon those to best control pests, provide nitrogen, and control soil fertility in a way that makes our agricultural landscapes more profitable, but importantly, provide important environmental benefits. Two more groups of sites, and then we'll wrap up. We have the tundra sites, the Niwot Ridge, a high elevation site in Colorado, and the Arctic LTER way up in Alaska, which represents one of our most rapidly warming region on Earth. And so this site has an important societal goal to predict the response of Arctic ecosystems to environmental change and make sure that the insights gained from that research are provided to federal, state, and local officials, including those who regulate the lands on the North Slope where the Arctic Lake and Toolik Lake watershed is located. Whoops. Finally, our urban sites, the Central Arizona Phoenix and Minneapolis St. Paul sites are addressing dynamics of urban natural lands, and again, calling out the very new Minneapolis St. Paul LTER site, where some studies are focusing on how municipalities put rules of nature into practice. And how interest groups best advocate for changes in governance of urban natural lands. So that's a wrap up of our different types of sites in the LTR network. You're going to learn so much more in the afternoon session about the work that these sites are doing, especially in sustaining natural landscapes within their settings. I just wanted to wrap up by pointing out that we, as an LTR community, try to link observations, experiments, long-term collaborations, and expanding opportunities to make sure that we improve our understanding of how natural ecosystems vary, how they function, and also enable this framework enables us to capture rare and unanticipated ecological surprises. And I just want to invite you to learn more about LTER throughout the day today. And to, if you have any questions, please direct them to myself or Marty Downs. And there's all kinds of ways to engage more with LTER, including through our all scientists meetings that happen every 3 years, our newsletters and community forums. So thank you so much, and I'll be glad to take any questions if there's any time for them.
Thank you, Evelyn. That was most excellent. A great way to get us set up for today. We do have one question, and that comes from Sarah Tangren. She would love to see some forest and grassland LTERs in the East. How do we support that? Right, our
well,
question mark?
That's a great question. And I guess, so the every so often there are opportunities that come through the National Science Foundation for additional sites to be added into the network. Those, of course, are constrained by the availability of funding at the foundation to do so. I would just point out that the LTR community does love working with other long-term research communities, and there are other kinds of mechanisms through which long-term research is supported, including biological stations, the National Ecological Observatory Network, and other other place-based programs. So I would be glad to talk more about those other programs that support long-term science. And just want to make sure that that's clear that we embrace long-term science elsewhere.
Okay, very good, very good. Let's see. There is a question from Joshua Bennis here. What are ways in which non-LTER sites that also manage long-term ecological monitoring records and natural areas collaborate with the LTER program?
That's just a fantastic question, and we want more of that. We're really dedicated to developing mechanisms so that that happens more efficiently. One of them is through our synthesis activities that are coordinated by our network office. We have calls for proposals every year that for science that brings together data from LTER, from other long-term data repositories and sites. And these calls are open to the full ecological community for synthesis of data across different types of programs, and all different sorts of communities have been involved in these, and we hope to see more of that over time. That's one mechanism. Engaging with nearby LTER programs is an important one as well. And I would just add that those different points of engagement that I mentioned in my last slide, check those out and just directly contact Marty or I or a local PI or nearby PI, and we can make sure that those opportunities are clear.
Excellent, excellent. Nick Haydad offers there are some LTER sites that are
co-located with
co-located
yeah.
with the National Ecological Observatory Network, long-term agro ecosystem research, and other existing research monitoring networks. Wonderful, wonderful.
Yep.
Okay, any other questions for Dr. Gaiser? You can certainly put those in Q&A. Oh, let's see. I'm sorry, let me. Okay, a couple more. Elan Alford asks, what DEIA initiatives are ongoing and planned for LTER?
Thank you for asking that. And we do have a very strong committee for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we have made this a big priority, not only at sites, but also across our network. We're in the midst of hiring a coordinator for those activities, and through those efforts, we can ensure that our sites have very specific goals and plans for meeting those goals to make sure that we're providing opportunities broadly to all communities, and that we advance in our ability to ensure that the STEM field is broadly I don't want to use the wrong words here. It's an understatement to say populated in a way that represents the distributions of our communities that we live and work in. But that's one of the goals. And at the network scale, we're really trying to drive those efforts forward. And we have a wonderful website with a diversity of resources that we've collated, and I can put that link in the chat as well, because we're hoping that those efforts that we've been undertaking inform other communities as well and can be helpful for others.
Wonderful. Please do that.
Mhm.
All right. We will be sure to share that last slide, the information on your last slide too, as part of the follow-up with all attendees, so they have direct access to the network offices and to you and Marty. Does the LTER research system have any good documentation or references that new sites could use to pilot and begin new long-term research in a way that could match up with your initiatives in the future?
That's a great question. And if you, again, I may put a link in the chat there. We do make the proposals that we write as sites are probably the best, and the reports that we deliver are probably the best place to see how sites are organized and what work we do. And so I think that that's a good place. I see in the notes here from Jennifer Rogers, and this is really a great point. We have a wonderful LTR book series, and that's published through Oxford Press, and we I can put a link to that as well. But there's so many ways, and we love to do that. So we'll provide those in the chat.
Excellent. Excellent.
Great.
Thank you.
I see
Yes,
some
lots
links
of
going in.
resources.
Thanks.
Yeah, lots of resources being offered there in chat, and we'll be sure to capture those as well. All right, it looks like we might have one more here. Near the end of your presentation, you mentioned shifting baselines. I believe this is one of several challenges with respect to public understanding of nature. What resources might LTER offer with respect to helping better communicate this concept?
Oh boy, that's huge. And I think that's a really good question. We should talk more about this afternoon. What can we do to help communities better understand shifting baselines? It's a hard one. And I think we have a lot of documentation of these kinds of presses, we call them often, or ramps in ecology, these changes that are happening directionally and important attributes of our ecosystems. And I think we try to share those out through our education and outreach programs and our media interactions, as well as interactions with people making decisions. But you know, it's hard, and I think that's an important. I like that Ryan, you brought that up, and I think it's worth talking more about.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, Ryan. And yes, this could be a question for everybody involved today to keep in mind. And if it can come up in the breakout sessions, it's part of the discussion. That would be a great place to address it for anybody that has some additional insight. So thank you, Evelyn, so very much.